the doc looked at me and said, "This is part of the test." And that's when I realized, aha. I wanted to follow up on my last video because we got a tremendous response for me, small channel. I see a lot of people talking about when they knew they were autistic, and I thought from a parent's point of view, from through the looking glass, it might be interesting to look at when we first knew our daughter had autism. It wasn't necessarily one moment. It wasn't some aha day that happened. It was more a series of things leading up to the process of testing and getting that report. But there were things before that, obviously, that prompted us to get the testing done. So I have two friends. I have two friends actually in the world, real friends, and they're both teachers, just coincidentally. And one has two boys. His sons are both on the spectrum, different spots on the spectrum. And then my other friend, who's also a teacher, works directly with autistic kids, and she's on the West Coast. On one of her trips here to visit, she kind of very politely asked if we thought our daughter might have a learning disability of some kind, if we had noticed anything. That's very brave of somebody, right, to come forward and suggest that your child could be tested. Sorry, I'm hearing like a squirrel or something on my roof. But it was very brave of her to come forward and very delicately broach the subject. So kudos to her. And she had said that, she had listened to us on the phone and heard our stories about the difficulties and the challenges our daughter was having and that we were having raising her, and how we seemed to be one step removed from the other kids and families, and we didn't know why, because our daughter, there was always some little drama or issue going on in the social settings that we were trying to embed ourselves in so she would have these connections, right? She suggested that we get her tested because I guess there are three big areas, and I'm not an expert, but I think there are three boxes you have to check to have a very good indication that a child might be on the spectrum and you should go get them more formally tested. And she saw two. She didn't see the third, but she was also quick to point out that the third could manifest in so many ways. And she was only here for a few days, and the trip wasn't about that. It was a visit. And so she suggested that we take our daughter to get more formally assessed. And we eventually did. We got our daughter tested more than once. We took her first to a doctor that was in our health group. Our daughter kind of melted down less than a half hour into things, maybe going on an hour, I forget. It was a long time ago now. But the test was cut short, and our daughter just wasn't having it. And I was getting frustrated, and I was frustrated not only with, the fact that we couldn't get this testing done, and I was getting a little maybe antsy about my daughter's behavior. But then there was a question that my daughter really dug in her heels on the answer to, And the doctor was insisting that, it was a multiple choice thing, a visual multiple choice thing. Which of these is most like that? And she felt that the test itself was wrong and that it couldn't be any of those answers. And he insisted that one of them was the right answer. And I looked more closely at it, and I felt that the test was wrong. And I've never gone in for testing myself, but maybe that tells you something, I don't know. But I sided with my daughter, and things melted down from there. And it was cordial, we weren't like flipping tables or anything. But things broke down, and my daughter couldn't continue. And he suggested, continuing the test another time. So we then went to a place called Fraser, which you might have heard of, and they are set up for this. And it took months, and it took I think it took like a year to get the appointment to go in to be assessed. And it was supposed to be an all-day sort of thing, like pack a lunch sort of thing. And we went in ready to do that, wondering how our daughter would get through it. And this guy was nice and warm and fuzzy and had a way with kids. And we kind of just sort of heaved a sigh of relief. And the testing began, and she took a liking to him, and they had a great rapport, and she got through so many parts of the test. But eventually, I think to going on hour 3 or so, she started to wear out and get the giddies. And at a certain point, I was starting to worry that we're so close, and we're not going to get this done now because she's kind of acting out a bit, and she's getting silly, and she's like hitting there's part of it is on a laptop, and you have to tap the space bar when something starts and stops, and just pay attention to it. Maybe it was an ADHD component to the test, I don't know. But she was done by that point, and she was actually on the floor, not even seeing the screen, with her hand up on the table, hitting the space bar randomly and giggling and laughing and amused with herself and amused with the whole situation. And I started to get a little heated and angry, not at her per se, but at being so close to having this testing done and thinking that now we're, again, not going to get it done. Now we'll never know. So I started to be a little stern. I didn't want to get too stern because that would just cause a meltdown and we'd be definitely done. I said, hey kiddo, how about you just sit up and we're almost through it and take this more seriously and pay attention and pay attention. And on about the third pay attention and her giggling under the table, the doc looked at me and said, this is part of the test. And that's when I realized, it wasn't about what was going on the screen, this part of the test. It wasn't about the right answer. And maybe it wasn't about the right answer on that other test that I too failed. Maybe it's about him being able to observe her in a certain moment of stress or moment of demand on her. And I just could see in his eyes that he knew something. And that's when I knew. That's the moment I knew in my gut that it wasn't just being an only child. It wasn't just us being helicopter doting parents and her being used to getting her way. It wasn't about any of that. And I realized that she had been really struggling with something all this time, even during the times when I, as a parent, thought she was testing me, testing my boundaries, and testing the limits of what she could get. All of that normal stuff that kids do, that she probably did to some degree, but also to some degree, she wasn't trying to get something she wanted. But I realized probably more than half the time she was just trying to get something she needed, and only had the same tool set that the other kids have, and maybe not even that in some cases. And my heart sank, not because she seemed like she was going to get a positive result on the test and be autistic, but because, just like in that earlier test, I was blind as a dad in certain moments to my daughter's needs. It just came over me, bowled over me. And we finished the test, said thank you. He'd write it up and get it to us. It took weeks to get the results. And when we got the letters and the long report and we read it, my wife and I read it together, and she cried. And we've talked about it. She didn't cry because our daughter is autistic. She cried because she realized that same weight hit her, that she was now going to have more challenge and more stress. And my wife, as a woman, had already spoken about the difficulties of growing up as a woman and having to fight for, her place at the table, so to speak, in things in college and then as a lawyer later. And now our daughter was going to have this added layer of fight to get through, to get what she needed out of life and what she wanted out of life. And she cried, and I held her. And I tried not to cry. I don't know, I'll be honest, I don't know that I cried, but I was crestfallen thinking all this. And we love our daughter. We're not ashamed of her one bit. I think she's more innately intelligent than so many adults that I know. So that wasn't it. It was, I think in that moment, my wife and I cried for all the times that we thought we were parenting right because we were taking advice from other parents and from books, none of which were geared towards raising a neurodiverse child. And how our daughter must have felt shut down as a human being, not just as a child, capricious kid who wanted, more ice cream or something like that, but was asking for basic understanding that she was turning to us for, that we were blind to. I mean, we would go for walks as a family. Haven't done that in a while, but, it was not uncommon for us all to set out happy-go-lucky in the car and come back to the car 30, 40, 60 minutes later, and one of us, either myself or my wife, was a villain all of a sudden in my daughter's eyes. And we didn't know why. Sometimes it was something as simple as asking her to put on her jacket because it's getting chilly out. Sometimes it was, let's go this way around the lake. It looks pretty over there. And through that lens of getting this report in our hands that said for sure that she was autistic, all of that sort of stuff comes rushing back to you in a moment. And we realized maybe her jacket, that now that we think of it, she never put on, we had to fight to put it on her, was uncomfortable. But she didn't have a way to explain what way it was uncomfortable, because she has sensory issues. Maybe that way around the lake looked too pokey and scary in some way. Maybe, all manner of things because of her own sensory relationship with the world seemed obvious to her. She expected her parents to understand. And there was no way we could. And in many cases, there was no way for her to tell us unless we were tuned up, to her experience of life. But I'll tell you, getting that report in our hands was a big deal. It was a big moment for us to realize that it was time to tune up. Just like when you learn an instrument, sometimes you have to tune up to an individual and understand and anticipate how it might affect them and their sensibilities. And when you're a parent of an autistic kid, you tune up. And it's important. And it's not perfect. But just knowing that there's this new language we need to learn. There's this new music we need to play. Means a lot, and it's very helpful. So that's all I have for now. I think, if you suspect any of these things about a child, if you're having any of these same experiences where you just feel like the odd one out sometimes in social groups with other kids and things, have your kid tested. I say that like it's easy, right? It takes forever to get an appointment. It's hard to get through. But if you can, it might be worth it. You might find out that your kid isn't autistic, but has ADHD or something. It's worth it. It's worth it. So that's when we realized that our daughter was autistic. Me sort of in the office in that moment, with all those other moments rushing back to me. And my wife probably has her own moment before we got the results that maybe I'll ask her about. I'm sure she's very intuitive, and maybe she had a moment too when she realized something was up and we should go get tested. Probably the case, because she was instrumental in it happening. She kind of made it happen. So I'll ask her about that. But anyway, thanks for watching. I want to talk in the next video another thing about raising an autistic child. This was not supposed to be an autism channel, and I don't think it will be in the grand scheme of things, but I seem to enjoy talking about it and getting a lot of this out of me, because I don't have a lot of people to talk to about it. And we have had some experiences with a pretty hot button issue that if you know what ABA therapy is, we had our own little adventure with ABA therapy, and we'll give you our take on that maybe in another video coming up. Might amuse or confound you, I don't know. Oh, please like and subscribe if you are getting anything out of this channel. I'm Tom, and I'll see you soon.